In the summer of 1957, Marvin Gaye and Darnell were standing on the corner of 7th Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., doing what they had been doing for 2 years, singing. Not for money, not for an audience, not for anything except the thing itself, the specific pleasure of two voices finding each other in a harmony that neither could produce alone. Darnell was 17, Marvin was 18. They had met at school and discovered, almost by accident, that their voices went together in a way that felt like something. They sang doo-wop, the moon glows, the flamingos, the orioles, on the corner and in the church, and wherever else two teenagers in 1957 Washington could find a reason to make the sound they wanted to make. The summer ended. Marvin told Darnell he was leaving. Harvey Fuqua had come through with the moonglows, and Marvin had done what he always did when he wanted something badly enough. He found a way into the room. Fuqua had listened. Fuqua had offered. Marvin was going. Darnell had known it was coming without quite having let himself believe it. He had a job at his uncle's grocery and a girl in the neighborhood he was thinking about seriously, and a mother who needed the money he brought home every Friday. The mathematics of his life did not include a road trip to follow a Moonglows tour. He told Marvin good luck. He meant it. He stood on the corner of 7th Street and watched his friend walk away, and then he went back to the grocery and stocked shelves and tried not to think about the specific feeling of a harmony he was no longer half of. The years passed in the way that years pass when a life has a shape to it, predictably, with enough variation to keep it from feeling like repetition. Darnell married the girl from the neighborhood. He took over his uncle's grocery in 1963. He and his wife had 3 children. He was, by any measure, living a good life in Washington, D.C., in a neighborhood he had always known, among people who knew him. He followed the career from a distance in the way that you follow someone you used to know. Not systematically, not obsessively, but consistently, the way a background frequency stays present even when you are not paying attention to it. He bought Stubborn Kind of Fellow in 1962. He bought I Heard It Through the Grapevine in 1968, stood in his store and listened to it on the radio the first time it played and thought, "That is the voice I used to stand next to. That is exactly the voice." What's Going On arrived in the spring of 1971. Darnell heard it first at home on a Sunday afternoon, his wife in the kitchen, his youngest daughter asleep in the next room. He put the needle down, and what came out of the speakers was not what he had been prepared for. Not because it was surprising. He had been following Marvin long enough to know the direction the music had been moving, but because of what it did to a specific memory he had been carrying for 14 years without knowing how much weight it had. The voice on the record was the same voice, older, deeper, more controlled, 14 years of professional training and professional grief laid over the raw material, but the same instrument that had been standing next to him on a corner in 1957, reaching for the high note on a Moonglows song, finding it with a naturalness that had made Darnell stop singing and just listen. The same instrument that could, apparently, do this. He played the album 4 times that Sunday. He did not call anyone. He did not write a letter. He was not the kind of man who wrote letters to famous people, and Marvin was famous in a way that made the distance between them feel like more than the distance between Washington and wherever Marvin was living in 1971. The corner of 7th Street and a Grammy nomination were not the same geography. He thought about Marvin sometimes after that. Not with longing. His own life was full, and he was not a man who spent much time looking backward. But with a specific quality of recognition that was different from pride and different from regret, and did not have a clean name. Something like, I was there for the beginning of that. I stood next to that voice before it became what it became. I know something about that nobody else knows, and I have never told anybody, and I am not going to. Marvin Gaye died in 1984. Darnell read about it in the Post. He sat at the kitchen table in the same house where he had put the "What's Going On" needle down in 1971, and he held the paper, and after a while he folded it and set it aside. The corner on 7th Street is still there. The grocery has been something else for years. Darnell is an old man now, and Washington is a different city than the one where two teenagers stood and found each other's harmonies on a summer night in 1957. Some things you carry without knowing you are carrying them. The weight of a voice you used to stand next to. The memory of a harmony that existed for 2 years and then ended and never existed again in that exact form. Not for either of them. Not anywhere. Marvin left. Darnell stayed. One of them became the kind of famous that means people write about your voice 50 years after you are gone. The other one built a life on 7th Street and raised 3 children and ran a grocery and stood in that store one morning in 1968 and heard the radio and thought, I know that voice. I know exactly what that voice is. He was right. He had always known.